Todd Belt is the Director of Political Management Program at the Graduate School of Political Management in the US. So Todd, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here in New Zealand.
Sure. The Political Management Program, redundantly in the Graduate School of Political Management, teaches people how to work in politics. We like to call it the MBA of politics. It's a master's degree. Unlike political science where you would study politics, this is actually for doing politics. And I got here by way of the University of Hawaii at Hilo, where I was a professor for 15 and a half years, and I started at George Washington about 6 years ago. I'm passionate, like many people, about politics, and I love teaching it, and this is how I got here. I've been on a State Department-funded tour of New Zealand, talking to people about the U.S. political system, how it works, and some of the issues and campaign considerations going on in this particular cycle.
Awesome. So I'll start with this question, which will be pretty basic for you, but I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand the US election process. Can you explain the US election process and what is the Electoral College and how does that work?
Right. We have different levels of elections in the United States. We have a system of federalism where we have state and local elections that are, of course, very important. There are state houses, state governors, and we have, of course, 3 different branches of government, and 2 of them are elected. They have the House and Senate in the legislature. The House is elected every 2 years. All 435 voting members have to run every 2 years. In the Senate, there is 1/3 that run every 2 years because they have 6-year terms, which means not the same group is up each time, which leads into some really interesting dynamics in terms of who controls which chamber. And of course, the presidency is determined by the Electoral College, not the popular vote. And there have been occasions in our history, particularly recently, when the electoral vote result does not match the popular vote count. And that's possible because each of the states has as many electors to the Electoral College as they have members of the House plus members of the Senate. So everyone has 2 members of the Senate, plus you have at least 1 member of the House. So that's a total of 535. And then Washington, D.C. gets as many as they would have if they were a state, which they're not. So they get 3. That's a total of 538 electoral votes, and you need a majority to win. 269 is half, and that's not a majority. If nobody gets a majority, by the way, the House of Representatives decides who the president will be on a state-by-state vote basis. So you need 270 to win in the Electoral College, and there are all winner-take-all states in 48 of the states, meaning that if you win a plurality in the state, you get all of the electors. The 2 exceptions are the states of Maine and Nebraska, where you will get 2 electors if you win the state overall, and 1 for each of the congressional districts that you win there. So this gives rise to the fact that we have sometimes what we call swing states, which are ones that could go in either direction, as opposed to the lock-in states that are probably almost assuredly going to go for one party over another.
So they're the key battlegrounds, and what states are they?
Yeah, well, they change each time a little bit, but this year in 2024, the key battleground states are going to be, or they are, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
So what are the key challenges and opportunities facing both of the major political parties in the 2024 US election?
Right. Well, I would have said when Joe Biden was still the nominee that the key issues facing both of them was trying to get people out to vote. We had a very low voter enthusiasm for the candidates when we had 2 candidates who were running who were both prior presidents. Both were very old and not terribly inspiring, and were frankly 2 of the most disliked candidates we've ever had running for office. It's still about turning out voters. The challenge is you want to turn out your voters, you want the other side not to turn out theirs, and for that slim little bit in the middle, people who are still undecided between the 2 parties in our hyper-partisan type of system that we have now, you want to be able to convince them. So trying to find the right issues. And I think the most important thing is to be able to tell people how their lives will be better under your administration versus the others. And to do that in such a way where you're not doing too much attacking and giving people a little bit of hope, because after all, elections are about the future.
So is artificial intelligence shaping modern political campaigns? And has it affected this campaign this year?
Right. Only tangentially. We've found so far that many people were expecting that AI was going to generate a bunch of what we call deep fakes and types of images and recordings and videos that were not true and would influence voters. But it turns out the technology is just not there yet. It tends to like put a six finger on people and becomes very easy to identify as not being a real image. And so what we've actually seen with AI is it's been using by actors internationally, including Russia and Iran, to create these bots that actually populate social media. They create what we call synthetic accounts, which are then used to spread disinformation to American voters. And they're not trying to convince people to vote one way or another. They're just trying to work on the existing divisions in the country and to create even more wedges in them.
So moving on, so what advice would you offer to young leaders navigating the political landscape today, especially when it comes to handling misinformation, which is pretty rough?
Right. Well, I love this question because this is what we teach in our program. And one thing is to be reminded that digital isn't everything. And a lot of my younger students have grown up as digital natives, and they think that everything can be done over social media and the internet, and it certainly isn't everything. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to make sure that you are not targeted by phishing attacks, because that has happened. That has even happened this current election cycle. You have to be aware of what's real, what's not real, what's coming to you from bots, and try not to be a useful tool of people out there who are trying to convince us that our institutions are corrupt and that things are going on that really aren't.
And just leading on to that question, so what skills do you see are crucial for future political managers?
Right. I did mention that digital isn't everything, but it is a lot. Okay. And fundraising and messaging is primarily being done through digital strategies now. But still, the good old-fashioned shoe leather, going door to door, doing canvassing, talking to people. One of the things we've found that can really reduce the partisanship and get people to realize that they share common values is one-to-one interaction. Talking to your neighbors, talking to your family members. There's an old saying in politics that there's two types of candidates, those that knock on doors and those that lose. Okay. And so it's still really important to be able to make a person-to-person contact, because after all, politics is about trying to make everybody's lives better. And it's important that you actually show people that you're dedicated to that.
So how should educational institutions prepare the next generation of political leaders, considering the rapid advancements of technology such as AI and political communication?
Right. Well, in the whole technological landscape that we have right now, it can be really demoralizing. Just as people get a lot of depression by looking at everybody else's lives that look so great on social media, you can get depression by all of the negativity that you sometimes come across in social media. But it's important to remember that we're in this because we want to make people's lives better, and that you can, and that there are examples, even in a very partisan environment, where both parties work together to get things done. I can point at specific pieces of legislation just within this past Congress that have been very effective at helping people, helping the country, moving it forward. Politics is a worthwhile endeavor. I think it's important that our institutions reinforce that among some of our young people.
How can political campaigns strike a balance between engaging with voters on social media and avoiding that spread of misinformation?
Right. Well, the first thing is to really be responsible about what you put out there. That's difficult to do in a type of environment where speed seems to be everything and you want to be first at everything. But fact-checking and making sure you get things right is really important. Ultimately, you can damage your own credibility if you move too quickly and you end up repeating things that are not true. I think it's important to put the extra legwork in to make sure that you retain your credibility, because ultimately politics is a long-term game and you want to be in it for the long haul, and some short-term decisions could really ruin that.
So while you've been here in New Zealand, what have you observed of the political landscape here, and how does it compare to other democratic systems?
What I've noticed here in New Zealand is that it's a different type of political system, obviously, with the different type of parliamentary system, but also what we sometimes call the Overton window, which is the availability of what is okay to discuss in terms of public policy is a bit more narrow. meaning that there's a lot more agreement among politicians about what can be done and how it can be done. Mostly it's in the how where they get into the details. Okay. I've also been gratified by how much New Zealanders are really interested in the U.S. political system. They like to remind me how much it matters to them what goes on in the United States, and they're watching very keenly and are very interested in what goes on in our country.
Cool. And what are some of your key takeaways from your visit this week in New Zealand?
Well, it's a beautiful country full of really great people, and I've been to a number of different civic groups and such, and I've gotten really great crowds and lots of questions, sometimes going over the time allotted, people coming up to me asking questions afterwards. And everybody is very, very interested in our system, and they like to remind me what America does really impacts the rest of the world, and that we should be really mindful of that.
So I myself, I like pies. It gives me a great deal of comfort and satisfaction to have a really good pie. So what gives you comfort and makes you satisfied, like on a work level and also a personal level?
Well, if I didn't say my wife first, I would probably be in a little bit of trouble. But of course, that's really important. She's great, and she gives me a lot of comfort and satisfaction. From Southern California, I'm a surfer, and I like to get out in the water. And being in nature and getting a good workout simultaneously is something I really love.